So what we want to look at today, guys, are differences and similarities between plant and animal cells. We're going to also hopefully have time to look at the structures within the cell, just in terms of getting your cell diagrams labeled. Okay, that way you'll be able to label the stuff you saw in the lab the other day. All right. So we have to know and understand how plant and animal cells are different and understand why they have those differences. Okay, and thirdly, be able to correctly label plant and animal cells. Right. So we'll quickly go through all of that. Now, we talked about why they're similar, okay, and that we think that they had a common ancestor at some point in the past. But why do they have so many differences? I mean, what's the main thing that's different about a plant and an animal? Right, the way they get their source of energy. Okay, believe it or not, the source of energy, chemically speaking, for plants and animals is the same thing. What is it? Sugar. Okay, sugar is the fuel that your body needs to burn. Everything you eat, all right, gets converted, if it's going to be used for energy, converted into glucose. All right, and glucose is also what is produced by photosynthesis. All cells burn the same fuel because we have the same machinery to burn it. Right? It's one of those things that we actually have in common. So it's how we get to that fuel that's different. Obviously, for animals, we consume other organisms, and then we break down their tissue, okay, and the molecules that make up their tissue, and we convert them, build glucose out of that, and then we burn the glucose, or we use whatever other nutrients came in it. Okay? Are some things more easily converted to glucose than others? Yes. All right. Carbohydrates, which are basically already kind of sugars, are easily converted to sugars. All right. So if you eat a lot of carbs, there's a lot of energy in carbs because it can easily be converted to glucose. If you eat fats, fats are also very high energy, not quite as easily converted to glucose, but fairly easily. All right. Protein, that's a lot more difficult. Okay? Protein is not easily converted into glucose, and as a result, it's often used in large amounts if someone is trying to cut weight quickly. Right? They will then often go to like a high protein type of diet because your body actually has to invest energy to get energy out of protein. Right? So your body has to work a lot harder. Everybody with me on that? Now, if you're a plant, where do you get your glucose from? Obviously, it's photosynthesis, but what does photosynthesis use? Sunlight and what else? Because sunlight is a source of energy. It's not a source of material. Right? Carbon dioxide and one other thing, water. Right? With carbon dioxide and water, you can make sugar. Right? Light provides the energy for breaking up the carbon dioxide and the water molecules and then reassembling them into glucose. All right, so modes of nutrition. Okay, you're essentially one of two things. Okay, when we're talking about how you get your energy. So there's lots of subtle differences between the plant and animal cells. Okay, different modes of nutrition is where the biggest differences occur. Obviously, again, for these lions here chewing on the wildebeest, okay, they're eating other organic material and they're using the organic material for energy. Whereas for a plant, okay, it's taking in or it's absorbing solar energy. It's taking in carbon dioxide, Terry. Okay, and it's taking in water from the roots and giving off oxygen as a byproduct of making glucose. Okay, everybody with me there? So, some animals are chemo heterotrophs. If you are a chemo heterotroph, you are a chemical other feeder. It's technically what that word means. You use the chemicals from other organisms to feed yourself. Chemical other feeder. Okay? Chemo heterotroph. Right? So that means they have to consume chemicals from other organisms to make energy, so their cells have to have certain structures. Okay? One of those structures are lysosomes. Okay? Lysosomes are like the stomach of the cell. They contain digestive enzymes that can break down food material. All right? So, an earthworm. Okay, example of a chemo heterotroph. It consumes decaying material on the Earth's in the soil and on the Earth's surface as its source of energy. All right, fungus or fungi. Okay, also do the same thing. We talked about that the other day. Some fungi are decomposers, like these mushrooms. They eat basically the same thing that worms eat, decomposing material on the ground or in the soil or whatever. Some fungus are parasitic. Okay, and they eat other organisms like athlete's foot. Okay, athlete's foot eats you. All right, there's a fungus that grows on your head that causes dandruff. You all have it. Okay, we all do. All right, everybody has a little bit of it. You keep it under control with proper personal hygiene. Okay, but it's there. All right, and it can cause like really itchy scalp and things. Now people are just thinking about it, right? Okay, but things like that can happen, right? But there's other sort of parasitic fungi out there, right, that will chew on essentially whatever it is they can grow on. Okay, and then the sort of more obvious chemo heterotrophs would be your predators. Okay, predaceous large animals, sharks, lions, tigers, bears. Okay, whatever you happen to be, that will consume something else. Okay, as a form of energy. Now, something that we haven't listed on here: would herbivores still be considered a chemo heterotroph? Yeah. Okay, they're still eating another organism for food. They're still a predator. Not much of a predator. It doesn't take much skill to prey on grass. Okay, you don't have to sneak up on it or anything. Okay, but you're still, if you were grass and you saw a cow coming, you'd probably be afraid. Maybe, I don't know. Okay, but you're still consuming another organism for food. All right, and that's sort of the general thing. All of them will have lysosomes within their cells to break that food down. All right, so within an animal cell, we generally have this type of arrangement. Okay, you've got a cell membrane. Okay, important that we only have a cell membrane because it makes the cells more flexible because animals are mobile. All right, they are able to move, they have to move, sometimes they have to move very quickly. So they have to have flexibility in their shape. And I don't mean like, like huge flexibility, but being able to move freely. All right, in terms of musculature that can, your muscles have to get shorter in order to exert force. So their cells have to be able to change shape readily, things like that. All right, so animal cells don't have cell walls, just a cell membrane. All right, other things that animal cells have that plant cells don't, obviously the lysosome. Okay, also the peroxisome, which is essentially a lysosome that doesn't have any food in it yet. It only contains the digestive enzymes. Bone cells, typically bone cells are more in the marrow part of the bone on the interior. There are some within the matrix, but they secrete and build the calcium deposits that become hardened bone. But yeah, they're not obviously as flexible as other cells within your body. Okay, they still have some flexibility, but they're embedded in a matrix of calcium, right? You got your nucleus, obviously that's common to both. Okay, endoplasmic reticulum common to both. Golgi apparatus common to both. All right, but you often see a lot more fibrous stuff within the animal cell. All right, microfibers, microtubules, things like that that connect sides of the cell to each other. That just helps to, again, give it flexibility but also strength. All right, otherwise the cell would be kind of like a water balloon. Okay, a really thin water balloon. If you twist it at all, it'll pop or break, right? But these microfibers and microtubules prevent it from getting too terribly twisted or too terribly stretched. Okay, they give it flexibility, but only to a point. They're kind of like bungee cords, right? That hold the cell at least at some semblance of the same shape. All right, so that flexibility obviously quite important in terms of the main thing animals have to be able to do, which is go and hunt down food. All right. Another thing that's actually not on this diagram that animal cells have that plant cells don't are centrioles. Okay. They have to do with cell division. Okay. We'll talk about them a little bit more in detail later, but just so you know, that's another difference. Animal cells are going to have those. Plant cells don't. Reason, again, has to do with the fact that animal cells can change shape. And if that happens while the cell is dividing, that could mean that one cell gets more of the DNA than the other cell, and that's bad. Okay? Because you don't want to have more DNA than you're supposed to have. That's not good. Okay? And you certainly don't want to have less than you're supposed to have. That's also not good. But either one is just as harmful. Okay? So the centrioles actually make sure that the right amount of DNA gets into both sides of the cell, regardless of what happens to the shape of the cell during the division process. Plant cells don't need that because their cells don't radically change shape at any point. All right, the other mode of nutrition. So the two modes of nutrition are chemo heterotrophs and photoautotrophs, light self-feeding. Okay, photo means light, auto means self or automatically, okay, and troph means feeding. All right, so light, self-feeding. They can use light to feed themselves. All right, so plant cells obviously produce their own food by capturing sunlight, okay, and using its power to remove carbon from CO2 to produce sugar for energy by photosynthesis. All right, so it's a nice balance. Plants take the CO2 that we breathe out, use it as a source of energy, okay, and they make glucose, and then we in turn eat them and turn it back into carbon dioxide, which they need for food, and it's a great cycle. All right, so it keeps everything going. Okay, questions on that one? All right, so plant cells obviously are going to be mostly the same, but going to have some differences. Okay, one of the big similarities is the presence of these organelles right here. All right, those are the mitochondria. Because both plants and animals have the same fuel source, glucose, they both have mitochondria. Because mitochondria burn glucose and release energy through the process of cellular respiration. All right, which is something you'll learn about in Bio 20 right at the very beginning. All right. One of the things that's different, how they get that glucose. They have to have something capable of carrying out photosynthesis. So they have chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are organelles that concentrate the chlorophyll into certain places within the cell. All right? They have, to some extent, an ability to move and change position within the cell of the plant. All right? Why would that be a good thing? John? Yeah. Yeah. Usually plants have, their leaves oriented and the sun hits the top, usually of the leaf, not the bottom. All right, so typically you would want more of your chloroplasts near the sunny side of the cell, whatever side that happens to be. So chloroplasts do have some ability to move within the cell or be moved within the cell and get on the sunny side. All right. They have structures within that you'll never be asked to label in Science 10, okay, that essentially concentrate that chlorophyll and help the process of photosynthesis to occur. And we talked about how that involves the electrons in the chlorophyll molecule jumping, okay, making that quantum leap from one state to the next. And then as they fall back down, that energy gets used to make glucose. Right. Another difference, this big water vacuole here. You don't see that in animal cells. They may have a few very small ones or none at all, okay? But plant cells always have one big water vacuole. And the reason is that it performs a supportive function. Okay? Plants have to be able to support their own weight somehow. They don't have bone. Right? So they have to be able to make sure that their leaves stay quite firm, okay, so that they're flattened and they're absorbing as much sunlight as possible for photosynthesis. When this water vacuole is full of water, it pushes on everything else in the cell and pushes it against the membrane. All right? In the same way that if you fill a water balloon about half full, it's quite flaccid, right? Like it's easy to change its shape and it's kind of loose. All right? Whereas if you fill it up really, really full, it's quite firm. All right, and you don't change its shape nearly as easily. Well, when the water vacuole is full of water, it pushes against the outside of the cell and helps maintain the cell's shape. This is why a plant that doesn't get a lot of water wilts. Right? Before it dies, it gets kind of soft and bent. You guys all seen that, right? Unfortunately, all my plants are actually half decently watered right now, and none of them are wilty. There's almost always one that's wilted in here, but okay. I won't water one of them for a while, and then you'll see it in a few weeks. Okay, but yeah, that's one of the things that holds the plant cell, or holds a plant up, is the millions and millions of these little water vacuoles pushing on all of the cells. The other thing that supports the plant is the cell wall. Okay, the cell wall is made of a very fibrous material called cellulose. How many people have heard of that? Okay, cellulose is plant fiber. All right, it's the stuff that makes paper, have its consistency. It's the stuff that, when you eat it, helps maintain regularity. If you all know what I mean, makes you go to the bathroom at regular intervals. Okay, number 2, at regular intervals. Yeah. Okay, fiber's important. Okay, fiber's important in your diet because it helps essentially clean you out. All right, you cannot digest it. We have no enzymes capable of converting cellulose into sugar. So cellulose essentially travels through our body chemically unaltered. All right? If you are a herbivore, obviously you do have enzymes capable of converting cellulose into sugar because that's what you eat. All right? But we don't. All right? We don't have a four-chambered stomach that's necessary to make that happen. All right? That's kind of it for the major differences. We'll talk more about the rest of them later, but the presence of the water vacuole, the chloroplast, and the cell wall are kind of the big things, and they again have to do with how a plant gets its nutrition. Being firm and being able to stay upright is important if you don't move, because it allows you to compete and get tall, okay, and shade out your competitors for light. Right? Make no mistake, plants are very competitive. Right? It's a survival thing. If they don't get tall and shade out their competitors, they'll get shaded out and they'll die. All right? So being able to get tall is really important, and the water vacuole and the cell walls help them to do that. Okay, so yeah, stiff cell walls and large vacuoles keep cells rigid would probably be the big thing there. Okay, also presence of chloroplasts. Okay, when you compare them, obviously we looked at this the other day, they have a lot of similarities, but those similarities are in the areas of cellular transport. Okay, plants and animals transport materials within their cells, at least, in the same way. All right, so they have similar machinery for that. The metabolism of glucose is exactly the same in both plants and animals, so they have similar structures for that. The way they contain their DNA, the way they make proteins, all of that stuff is all the same between plant and animal cells because it's efficient. The process that they both use works. All right, and that's, again, what leads us to believe they must have had a common ancestor. All right. Just want you to quickly answer these questions. I'm going to pass out your cell diagrams, and hopefully we'll get going on those here right away. Okay, so what's the main reason for the differences between plant and animal cells? Okay, Brad? Right, the way they get their sugars. What are the three words we use to describe that? Okay, that's one of these things. I'm thinking of three words here. Modes of nutrition. Okay, make sure you write that down. That's the terminology we're going to be looking for whenever you're asked about that. Their mode of nutrition is different. Okay, the two modes of nutrition are chemo heterotrophs, photoautotrophs. All right, so modes of nutrition. Hey, what organelle supplies plants with energy? What process does it use? Chloroplast and photosynthesis. Same question, but for animals now. Okay, so yeah, lysosomes, okay, and it essentially breaks down stuff into sugars. Okay, John. The mitochondria burns the energy supply. It makes ATP, which is the currency, money for the cell to do stuff. But what I meant here, in context, what I meant here was which organelle do they use to get to that point? Right? Because they do both use their mitochondria, yes, to get ATP, but to get fuel was what I meant. They use photosynthesis or they use their lysosomes. All right. All right. For number 4, transport within plant and animal cells is done in the same fashion. Okay. Why would that have been kept around? Why would they both still do it the same way? Terry? Right. Natural selection doesn't make changes unless there's a reason to do so. All right. For example, you wouldn't, let's say, if you had a cell phone that worked great, you wouldn't go out and get one that wasn't as good, would you? I would hope not. Okay. Well, natural selection is the same way. The only reason something gets set aside is because something better comes along. All right. So in this case, these processes work. Nothing better has come along. So that's what they continue to use. Right. Number 5, the nutritional needs of plants and animals are very different. Which would have survived best on a primordial Earth that had very little oxygen or organic material available? So basically we're saying very early on in the Earth's history, when there was essentially nothing but carbon dioxide, methane, okay, stuff like that in the atmosphere, nothing basically alive anywhere, maybe except for a few things, what would it have been? Photoautotrophs or chemo heterotrophs? Julia? Photoautotrophs, yeah. Okay. Sunlight would have been abundant. Water would have been abundant, okay, and so would carbon dioxide. Animals that would have needed organic material to live would have died, right, because there wouldn't have been anything for them to eat, right? plants, photosynthetic organisms, as far as we can tell in the fossil record, originated first. And we're not talking about multicellular things either. We're talking about essentially blue-green algae, single-celled algae cells that are very much like bacteria, okay, that could carry out photosynthesis. Were some of the first organisms on Earth. All right. Labeling your diagrams. Okay. So let's do this. Okay. Which cell is this? Plant or animal? Animal. All right. Now, for some reason, every diagram of the animal cell you look at has the flagellum on it. Okay? Which is weird because in human beings, you have virtually no flagellated cells. Okay, that's actually a word too, flagellated. Okay, in fact, if you're female, you have no flagellated cells because you don't make sperm, and that would be the only one that would have a flagellum on it. All right, so it's odd that it's always there because next to no animal cells actually have one. All right, you can label it though. Okay, it's a flagellum. All right. If they have more than one, by the way, it's flagella. Okay, like fungus and fungi, and I don't know. There's a whole bunch of others. Okay, hippopotami, right? Hippopotamuses, hippopotami. All right, now I'm gonna have that song in my head. Stupid. Ah. Okay, what's the big purple thing, guys? Okay, so it's the nucleus. So that's actually what this middle line right here is pointing at, okay, is the nucleus. Now the nucleus holds your genetic material. So it's got to have something that encloses it to protect it. What would we call the outer layer of the nucleus? Nuclear membrane. Anything that's kind of a barrier within the cell is a membrane. So this is the nuclear membrane. Right? All the organelles that are inside that we're going to label have their own membrane. All right, this big purple dark spot in the middle of the nucleus. Nucleolus. Yeah, nucleolus. Now here's the thing. On quizzes, these are the only two where spelling really, really counts. Because I oftentimes have people who aren't sure which one it is, okay, or they don't remember, so they go nucleolus, hoping that because they've kind of spelled both, but not really well, they might still get the answer. If it ain't got two L's, it's not nucleolus. You just couldn't spell nucleus. Okay, so make sure you're aware of that. You do need to know the difference. All right. All right, these little black dots here, some of them are on the endoplasmic reticulum here, the rough stuff, and some of them float free within the cytoplasm of the cell. They're really important because they make protein. It starts with R. Ribosomes. Okay, ribosomes are everywhere. I'd better not see them labeled, however, on any of your lab drawings, as they were not discovered until the electron microscope was invented. Okay, there's no way you're seeing any of them anywhere. All right. Realistically, the really big stuff within the cell. This first time, nucleus, nuclear membrane, because if you can see the nucleus, you can see the outside of it, so you could say nuclear membrane. Okay, maybe nucleolus if you can see a significantly dark circle within that. Possibly, you might see, some of the rough ER, maybe the Golgi, but I would doubt it, at least on the first one. Okay, as we get better on the next one, we'll be able to see them a little bit better. All right, so this stuff here, okay, the blue stuff kind of runs in lots of places throughout the cell, and it's got ribosomes all over it, is called the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which we abbreviate ER. Okay, rough ER. And on a test, ER will be fine. Okay, rough endoplasmic reticulum. I'm not going to talk too much about what everything does today, just because I want to get through the labeling. We are going to, next week, go over what each and every part of the cell actually does. All right, what's the outside of the animal cell? Cell membrane. Sometimes also called plasma. membrane. I would accept either, but usually we write cell. Okay, this blue stuff here, lighter in color, doesn't have the ribosomes all over it, but looks kind of like this stuff would be not fine. If this is rough, this is smooth. That's good. You're looking for an opposite there. That's good. Okay, so this stuff here is the smooth ER. Okay, what we've got here, okay, this kind of orangish looking thing, is the Golgi apparatus. That's supposed to have two P's, isn't it? Apparatus. You know what I mean. Apparatus. Okay. The Golgi apparatus gets rid of waste. That's its primary job. Okay. Now, this thing here, okay, kind of clear, looks like it's got something in it. That something is food. Is a lysosome. Right? These thick things here that are running throughout the cell, okay, are microtubules. Right? They're one of those supportive things that we talked about that helps keep the shape of the cell because it doesn't have a cell wall and has to be flexible. All right? Something similar to that, these are actually tubes, so they're hollow in the middle. All right? They look a little bit different than these ones up here that are microfilaments. Sometimes we also call them microfibers. On a test or a quiz, I would accept any one of these three for anything that appeared to kind of run through the cell and was kind of string-like. Because sometimes it's hard to tell whether it's a tube or a fiber. Right? So any one of those would be fine if you were labeling something like that on a test. Okay, these two yellow things were one of the things I was telling you that animal cells have that plant cells don't. They help with cell division. When the cell divides, each one of them will actually go to one end of the cell and make sure that the DNA gets from where from the nucleus or from the middle of the cell to where it needs to go. Centrioles. Okay, this thing here that's empty but looks kind of like the lysosome is a peroxisome. Okay, peroxisomes are like lysosomes. They have the digestive enzymes in them. They just haven't encountered any food particles yet. Okay, and the last thing here, the big red thing that burns sugar for energy, is the mitochondria. Okay, everybody got all those? Here's the good news about the plant cell. Pretty much everything is the same. All right, so I'm only going to label, just in case we run out of time, okay, I'm going to start with the things that are different in the plant cell. First thing that's different is right down here, okay, we can see that it has that big outer layer called the cell wall. Now, the cell wall, guys, serves no protective function whatsoever. A lot of people think that it's like the wall of a castle or something like that, but it's not, okay? It's actually so fibrous that there's gaps, there's holes, okay, between the fibers. All right, anything can get through the cell wall. It's actually the cell membrane that controls what gets in and out of the cell. The cell wall is kind of like a house that's just being built that's only in the framing stage. So they haven't put any kind of coverings on the walls yet. You can just see the studs. Okay, that's kind of like what the cell wall is. It provides structure, it provides strength, but no protective function whatsoever. All right, so other things that are different. The big green things, chloroplasts. I'm sorry, I should say chloroplast, singular. They're only labeled one. Okay, obviously the water vacuole. Okay? The water vacuole has a special membrane that goes around the outside of it called a tonoplast. Okay? It's a very special membrane that helps with the process of osmosis and moving water into the water vacuole. Okay? And yeah. Oh, they're not labeled. I actually cut the label off there. Okay? They're a structure that helps to transport fluid between the cells of a plant, but we don't have to cover them in Science 10, so I've taken the label off. All right, everything else pretty much the same. So this one here, we'll label as many as we can before the bell goes. Okay, cell membrane. Right? If the bell goes before we get done, you guys can obviously just compare between the animal cell and the plant cell and kind of label the rest because they all look the same. This one here, okay, would be a small water vacuole. Right? Usually what happens is small water vacuoles will migrate over and become part of, okay, the larger water vacuole. Okay, we got your smooth ER here. Okay, and obviously if they have the same structure, they do the same job between the plant and animal cell. Okay, rough ER. Okay, nucleolus. Nucleus, nuclear membrane, mitochondria, ribosomes, and Golgi apparatus. Yeah, it looks better with two P's. Yeah. Okay, so expect, guys, that probably next week sometime we might have a quiz involving labeling the parts of the cell. Wow, that was incredible timing. Nathan, you had a question before we go? Yeah, I just talked to Brad about that. We don't have to do those, so I've already actually cut the label off. So. Okay, have a good Thanksgiving weekend, guys. Okay, but not too good. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Okay, come back safe on Wednesday. We'll see you on Wednesday. Man, it's a long time.